December 1944. The Ardennes forest lay under a sheet of snow so bright it blinded the eyes at dawn. To the German officers stationed along the Siegfried Line, it was the perfect symbol of their confidence. Clean, silent, absolute. They believed winter itself would fight on their side, freezing the Allied wounded before the medics could reach them. In every report sent to Berlin, one phrase repeated like a chant. The Americans have machines, but they bleed like children. Captain Dieter Huss of the Wehrmacht's Medical Corps kept a journal. He had seen the carnage from both sides. But what fascinated him most was not courage or strategy. It was logistics, the mathematics of suffering. You can measure the strength of an army, he wrote, by how quickly its wounded die. He believed the Allies, for all their tanks and planes, would lose because they could not keep their soldiers alive once they were hit. His field reports detailed the enemy's weakness with surgical precision. No mobile transfusion units, blood stored in glass jars frozen by morning. The wounded screamed for morphine, for warmth, for blood. Inside, shattered churches turned into aid stations. The smell was unbearable. Wet uniforms, diesel smoke, iron, and rot. The blood stored in bottles cracked like ice. When a soldier died, the medics placed his tag on a nail hammered into the wall. Nails covered every beam. Radio intercepts confirmed the pattern. American casualties who might have lived in summer were dying within hours in winter. Their supply depots could not keep up. Their field hospitals overflowed. For the Germans, it was proof of superiority. Proof that technology could not replace discipline. But the Allies had something the Germans didn't see coming. A quiet revolution, born not from generals but from doctors. In London, a handful of surgeons and scientists had been working in secret on a new way to save lives on the battlefield. They weren't soldiers. They were pathologists, biochemists, and blood bank pioneers, men like Dr. Charles Drew, an American who had already transformed how blood was stored and shipped across oceans. Their discovery wasn't a new weapon, it was plastic, a simple, flexible polymer that could hold blood without freezing, cracking, or leaking. Something so ordinary, it was overlooked by most of the military brass. The idea came from a civilian laboratory, where scientists noticed that glass containers shattered in cold. Plastic, by contrast, flexed and held. What if, they wondered, blood could be carried not in bottles but in lightweight pouches? By 1944, prototypes were being tested in field hospitals in England and France. Each pouch could be sealed, sterilized, and stacked like rations. Soldiers called them blood bags. At first, the medical corps dismissed them as unreliable. Too new, too strange. Captain Haas first heard rumors of it through intercepted radio traffic. Mentions of plasma units, rubber containers, and miracle bags. He dismissed them as propaganda, tricks to keep morale alive among the exhausted Americans. But as the weeks passed, he began to see evidence with his own eyes. Prisoners taken near the front bore transfusion marks on their arms. Clean punctures sealed with tape. No frostbite, no infection. He confiscated one of the strange pouches from a fallen medic. It was light, flexible, filled with thickened red fluid that still moved when he tilted it. He pressed his thumb against it, astonished at the way it yielded. He wrote in his journal that night, "The enemy has changed the rules. They carry blood as though it were water." Back at his headquarters, Haas presented the pouch to his superiors. They stared at it in silence. No one had seen anything like it. One officer suggested it was a decoy, some kind of ruse, but Haas knew better. He could smell the faint iron inside, could feel the warmth of possibility in his hands. He called it the Quiet Revolution. That winter, while panzer divisions froze and starved, the Allies built mobile blood depots behind the lines. Trucks fitted with heaters and racks of these new plastic pouches drove day and night through shell fire. Each delivery meant another platoon could fight again. Another man could see the sunrise. Another story would not end in a frozen field. The mathematics of suffering that Haas had once trusted began to collapse. His equations no longer made sense. The Americans were no longer dying as expected. For the first time since the war began, Haas stopped writing. His pen hovered over the paper, useless before the realization that endurance no longer belonged to the Germans. It belonged to those who had learned how to save blood, not spill it. By February 1945, Allied medics moved through the snow with renewed purpose. Their kits were lighter, their steps faster. Inside their packs, the transparent pouches clinked softly together. Not glass, but life itself. Helicopters and jeeps began to ferry blood across front lines, marking the dawn of modern battlefield medicine. The concept of golden hours, saving the wounded before time ran out, was no longer theory but practice. Plastic turned logistics into mercy. It meant doctors could act before death arrived, not after. The simplicity of it seemed almost offensive to those who had spent years measuring war in explosions and maps. When Germany finally fell, Captain Hose was captured by Allied troops near Cologne. In his coat pocket they found a small notebook and the blood pouch he had once studied by candlelight. A medic recognized it instantly. He smiled and slipped it into his own satchel. For him it wasn't a trophy. It was a symbol of what had changed. Hose spent months in a POW camp, watching Allied doctors treat wounded prisoners with the same plastic bags he had once feared. For the first time, he saw the enemy's mercy up close. The war had not been won by stronger guns, but by softer hands, by those who refused to let science serve only destruction. Years later, when asked about the turning point of the war, few mentioned plastic. They spoke of tanks, bombs, generals, but the truth lay in those quiet moments under torn tents when blood found its way back into the living. What began as an experiment in London hospitals became a revolution that outlasted every empire it touched. The blood bag became a symbol of survival, of compassion, of the invisible victories behind every front line. And in the end, the simplest invention of the war would save more lives than all the armies combined. Proof that sometimes, the smallest container can hold the greatest hope. After the war, the technology spread faster than any weapon ever had. Hospitals across Europe adopted the blood bag system, turning military innovation into humanitarian practice. Dr. Charles Drew's research, once confined to dusty labs and military requests, became the backbone of civilian medicine. Blood banks multiplied, and for the first time, nations began to think of blood as a shared resource, not a private one. In Tokyo, Berlin, London, and New York, hospitals were rebuilt with cold rooms lined floor to ceiling with plastic pouches, each labeled, dated, waiting to be summoned when fate demanded it. War had shown what science could do when forced to adapt, but peace would prove what compassion could sustain. Veterans who had once bled out on battlefields now donated blood to save others. In their veins ran the story of a quiet miracle born in chaos. Captain Hose, years after his release, returned to medicine. He worked in a small clinic near Stuttgart, where he refused to let patients die for lack of a transfusion. He kept the same plastic pouch on his desk, empty, yellowed with age, a reminder that even in the darkest hours of humanity, someone had chosen to create rather than destroy. He would tell his students, "War teaches us nothing new about death, but sometimes it teaches us everything about life." The invention of the blood bag did not end wars, but it changed how the world healed from them. It showed that victory wasn't just about surviving, but about saving. In medical museums, the original blood bags sit behind glass, humble, translucent, and wrinkled with time. Visitors often pass them without a second glance, unaware that these scraps of plastic once turned the tide of a global war. Historians debate strategy and generals, yet the quiet inventions rarely make the headlines. They live instead in the bloodstream of history, invisible but essential. Every drop of blood saved on those frozen fields carried a message forward, that compassion, once armed with science, becomes unstoppable. It was not the roar of engines or the march of armies that defined the modern age, but the silent drip of blood through a tube, the heartbeat returning to a soldier thought lost. By the 1950s, the blood bag had become standard worldwide. It made organ transplants possible, surgery safer, and childbirth less deadly. All from an idea born of desperation and winter. Captain Hose died quietly in 1967. His journal, recovered by his son, contained one final entry. "I once measured war by the number of the dead. I now measure life by the number of the saved." In the decades that followed, his words found their way into textbooks. His story told to generations of doctors who never saw a battlefield but fought their own wars against time and death. The blood bag remains unchanged in design, proof that perfection sometimes arrives unnoticed. What began as a temporary wartime fix became a permanent symbol of human resilience. Its invention reminds us that progress is not always loud, nor heroic. Sometimes it begins with quiet hands, a flicker of empathy, and the courage to make life flow again. And so, in the shadow of every great conflict, one truth endures. The most powerful victories are not those won in battle, but those that choose to save instead of destroy. And somewhere, In every hospital where a doctor hangs a plastic bag above a patient's bed, the legacy of that frozen winter in 1944 still flows. Red, silent, and unstoppable.